You know who doesn't get studied enough? The guilt manipulator. Everyone talks about narcissists. Gaslighters get entire podcasts dedicated to spotting them. But the person who makes you feel like you owe them something just by existing, the one who sighs instead of asks, they slip under the radar every single time. And here's what nobody tells you. They weren't born manipulative. They were born into a world that taught them guilt was the only currency that actually worked. Picture this. It's 1978. You're 7 years old, sitting at a dinner table where nobody asks how you feel. Ever. Your parents are there, physically present, but emotionally gone. One's working double shifts, the other's nursing a drink and a list of disappointments. You learn fast that expressing a need gets you nowhere. Saying I'm sad gets you told to go to your room. Saying I'm scared gets you called dramatic. But guilt gets results. A study from the Journal of Family Psychology in 1983 found that nearly 62% of children raised in emotionally dismissive households developed what researchers called indirect emotional bargaining strategies by age 10. That's academic speak for learning to manipulate instead of communicate. Because when the direct path is closed, you find another route. You learn to cry at the right moment, to go silent in a way that demands attention, to make your pain everyone else's responsibility without ever naming it out loud. That empty emotional house did more than make them self-reliant. It drilled in the idea that your feelings don't matter unless they make someone else uncomfortable. And if you can make someone uncomfortable enough, they'll give you what you need just to make it stop. That became their survival skill, their whole operating system. And they've been running that program ever since. Here's the thing about growing up emotionally invisible. You don't just want to be seen. You need to control how you're seen. Because the one time you were honest, the one time you said exactly what you needed, you got dismissed. Or worse, punished for being needy. So you learned the lesson every guilt manipulator learns early. Asking directly is for people who matter without trying. You are not one of those people. Psychologists call it covert manipulation through emotional debt, but they just call it keeping score. They remember everything, every favor, every time they showed up when no one asked them to, every sacrifice they made that you didn't notice, and they're building a case, not consciously maybe, but it's there, a running tab of everything you owe them for being in their life. You see this play out everywhere once you know what to look for. The mother who says, "Don't worry about me, I'll just sit here alone on Thanksgiving." The friend who brings up that one time they helped you move 3 years ago, right when you're about to set a boundary. The partner who martyrs themselves in small, visible ways and then acts shocked when you don't fall over yourself with gratitude. They never ask for what they want. They just create a situation where you feel monstrous for not offering it first. But here's what's fascinating. They're not actually cold. They're the opposite. These are some of the most emotionally intelligent people you'll ever meet. They can read a room like a detective reads a crime scene. They notice the tiny shift in your voice, the half-second pause before you answer, the thing you didn't say. They are hypersensitive to emotional data because they had to be. When you grow up in a house where love is conditional and unpredictable, you become an expert at reading signals. You learn to scan for danger, for disappointment, for the moment someone's about to withdraw. And here's the paradox. They're simultaneously the most emotionally aware and the most emotionally manipulative people in your life. That same skill that makes them incredible listeners, that makes them remember your birthday and notice when you're off, that's the exact same skill they weaponize. They know what hurts you. They know what you're ashamed of. And when they need leverage, they know exactly where to press. Not with cruelty, with care, with the kind of intimate knowledge that only comes from actually paying attention. That's what makes it so hard to defend against, because it feels like love right up until it doesn't. You want to know why they don't trust authority? Because every authority figure in their childhood taught them the same lesson. Rules are for show. What matters is who has the emotional upper hand. They grew up watching marriages stay together out of obligation, not love. They sat through family dinners where nobody said what they meant and everyone knew it. So they respect one thing: leverage. Not titles, not credentials, just who holds the emotional cards. That's the only authority they recognize, the only one that ever protected them. They watched Watergate on TV and learned presidents lie. They saw televangelists get caught and learned even God's representatives are frauds. They lived through the divorce boom and learned that promises are just words until someone wants out. And economically, they got hollowed out. Pensions disappeared, job security became a joke. The social contract their parents believed in turned out to be a rough draft, not a binding agreement. So they learned to create their own contracts, ones written in guilt and obligation, ones he can't just walk away from without feeling like a monster. Here's the second wound, the one that looks like pure selfishness from the outside. They cannot let anyone be okay without them, ever. If you solve a problem on your own, they feel erased. If you're happy and they didn't cause it, they feel irrelevant. And that terror of irrelevance makes them scramble to reassert their importance in ways that look controlling, codependent, manipulative. But it's not about control, it's about worth. A 1991 study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that adults with dismissive avoidant attachment histories often developed what researchers called compulsive caretaking. They create need where none exists because being needed is the only proof of value they trust. You don't need them, then you don't love them. It's that simple in their nervous system, that binary. So they manufacture crises, they insert themselves into your problems, they make sure you can't quite function without checking in. Not because they're evil, because they're terrified, and guilt is the tether that keeps you close when love feels too unstable. This bleeds into parenting like poison. They raise kids who feel responsible for their feelings, who learn that mom's happiness is their job, who grow up believing that having boundaries makes them selfish. The same dynamic they lived through gets passed down, generation to generation, like a family recipe nobody wanted. And the cruelest irony? They think they're doing it out of love, because in their mind, need and love are the same thing. If you don't need them, how could you possibly love them? You know what's strange? They look at younger generations setting boundaries and going to therapy, and something in them breaks a little. Not out of bitterness, out of confusion. They see people saying, "I can't take that on right now," without collapsing into apologies. They see adult children limiting contact with parents and not being shunned for it. They see a world where emotional honesty is rewarded, not punished. So here's what they are. They're not villains. They're pressure valves in a system that was already broken when they got here. They absorbed all the unspoken rules about emotional labor and turned them into a language. A brutal one, sure, but one that made sense when nothing else did. They learned to regulate relationships through guilt because guilt was the one force strong enough to keep people from leaving. And the fact that they don't see it as manipulation, that's not denial. That's survival dressed up as love. They'll never ask for recognition. Asking would break the entire mechanism. The moment they admit they're using guilt, it stops working. So they stay in the shadows of their own strategy, convinced they're just doing what's necessary, what's fair, what anyone would do if they'd lived what they lived. And maybe the saddest part is this. They're so good at making you feel like you owe them, they've forgotten how to let someone choose them freely. If this one landed differently, hit subscribe. There's more where this came from. And if you want to support the channel, the link's below. No pressure, just appreciation.